Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing? It is another exciting day, and it is time for some more mapping. I am Graham, POC Gamer. Whatever you are watching me on right now, whether it's Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, or anything else, please make sure that you hit that like and subscribe button. And yeah, let's do some mapping together. So today is going to be a bit of an adventure, mostly because I don't myself normally use battle maps too often. I'm very much into the whole theater of the imagination when I'm doing stuff, and so we are going to be learning how to do battle maps and make them nice and look pretty and work all together. So, good times. So, here's Grafis Hill. This is where we left off last day. Yeah, it was pretty fun. So we have 7 points of interest on the map. We've got a little campsite down here. We've got some sort of giant skeleton. Some more big bones up here. Some ruins. I don't know. Some sort of sacred ritual space going on up here with a big rock in the middle. We have the mine, and we've got the big tree, which sort of links us up to the area over there. Although I feel I should make this bigger. Like, it doesn't seem to be hitting as hard as it should. For being a giant tree, but we'll deal with that later. So, yeah, we are going to select one of these to do, and this one, the mine is going to be the last, because the mine is going to be an actual dungeon, like a small dungeon sort of thing, where there'll be like the mine and some sort of cavern complex or something like that, something small behind it, appropriate for low-level adventuring. Enough to have a lot of fun, not enough that it feels like you're getting sucked into like a mega dungeon right away. So we're gonna do that one last, and I thought we'd start out easy, and we're gonna do this something for this bone area down here. Now, unfortunately, with this, when you do a resize / new map from region, it doesn't really. Well, we'll show you what will happen. So we've selected that. It's going to be what we want to work with. And layers, scenes, object, all that sort of stuff. So if we hit the confirm button and save and proceed, I'll show you why I don't usually do this for battle maps. Well, a few times I have puddled around with them. Love it, watching it think. Okay, so this is what's done. It's zoomed in, which is nice. But as you can see, in terms of battle map, if I throw the grid on, it's kind of, the scale feels off. Because generally, most games, 1 square equals about 5 feet, meter and a half or so space. And when you look at, let's see here. So I'll just give you an example. So here's the zoomed in area. And that's with the just the basic grid activated on it. Come on. Alright, here we go. So this looks like a big area. Like this is, you're like, okay, this is a fairly substantially sized area. That's supposed to be a big skeleton. This looks like the sort of place that, it's not a giant area, but it's also not necessarily tiny. If you imagine like a person might be the size of one of those railroad ties or rail ties there. So it's yeah. So the scale feels off, and if we let's see here, if we shrink it down, where is it? If we shrink it down, it still doesn't feel quite right. This is a very crowded space to work in. And this can absolutely work. Like it's not a poor choice, especially if you need to like do something really quick. Like I could probably take it. Yeah, that feels about right for the scale. So yeah, one person lives there. You know, that's a good question. I'm not sure why the skeleton's there. I placed the skeleton there because I thought it looked cool, um, and it's a neat fantasy thing. So the reason why the skeleton's there could be a whole little adventure hook in of itself for the players. Right now, I'm leaning towards some sort of like ancient beast or something like that. Died there, and maybe its remains, the remains or whatever it fought, or what they're mining in the mine to make stuff. Not sure yet, but yeah, that's why it's fun to place these things on maps, because it does a little bit of world building for you, and it can act as a catalyst for things down the road. I figure this is probably pretty fossilized about now. Um, definitely not rotting at this point. Like I feel that the decay process is probably done. But yeah, so you can do this. This does create a very hasty battle map, which sometimes is exactly what fits the bill and can do the job. But I would like to create something a little bit more specific and a little bit tighter feeling. So we're gonna come back here. It's much appreciated. So let's create a new map. We're gonna select watercolor battle maps, as I was doing. The selections have changed. That's interesting. Alright, so first we're going to turn our grid on. And we're going to make our grid a little bit smaller looking, because we need it to be big, but enough that the players can feel they can maneuver, but not so. Okay, hang on. Let me get my thoughts in order here. Okay, got it. So when you're laying out the grid for a battle map, the main thing that I look for is that the size of the map is comfortable to operate in. So there needs to be enough space in it that the players, non-player characters, and monsters can maneuver around, do things, and like sort of like be effective, be dangerous, all that sort of jazz. But it can't be so large that it feels like you're fighting on a football field. This is like one of the eternal challenges inside of any game that's using a battle mat, is that the further out you zoom and the bigger you make the battle space, the pro of that is that it does become more realistic, and ranged weapons immediately become much, much more important and more effective. But because of the nature of a lot of fantasy games where things are more melee oriented, you need to sort of balance out that with what you need to actually make the encounters feel good, because if every encounter starts and ends with the players spotting the monsters or spotting their opponents from across the map, lighting them up with arrows and spells, and then just closing in and finishing off whatever's left with spears and swords. Yes, that's good tactics. Yes, that makes sense, but it also, doesn't give you sort of the thrilling battles and conflicts that you may be looking for. Okay, so we're going to use this as a reference. So we see this path sort of going like that between the bones. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it can't be so spread out that area effect powers are useless. It needs to be big enough to space out the encounter. Yeah, that is exactly it. Yeah, like you want people to be able to maneuver around and do their stuff, but yeah, it is a real challenge. It's one of the reasons why I don't envy people who make battle mats like professionally and who like do this as like their bread and butter, because it is challenging. Because then on top of all those things that you just listed there, you also have to balance out making each encounter feel different. So yeah. Ugh. Okay, so we're going to paint our background here. So open our catalog. Wait, what color was the grass up there? So it's the medium grass. There we go, grass dark. So what I'm about to come up on here is going to be one of the another one of the big challenges that you will always have when you're doing this stuff, and that is, are you rolling it with pixels, like pixel style, or are you trying to create a more natural looking encounter map? And what I mean by that is that, are you going, so for this, for example, I'm creating this as I'm going to recreate sort of like this space right here, because I think that's a cool place to have a little battle. You've got these giant bones. You've got some trees around it, some bushes, a little pathway. Looks exciting to me. But the question is do I want it to look sort of natural like there, or scale this down? Grounds. Yeah. Do I want to do something like that? And like with a lot of stuff that I talk about here, there's pros and cons to this, or to doing a more natural looking. Let's see here. Or to doing a more natural looking thing. So with this, the benefit is that the players immediately know what each sort of pixel's on. So if you're really getting into like the nitty gritty of tactical combat in your games, where like you need to know what kind of ground is under the player's feet or the monster's feet, that sort of thing, creating a pixelated map might be the best way forwards for you, because then there's no ambiguity about it. Like this is water, this is grass, this is concrete, whatever. The downside is that it tends to not look too natural. But if you do something like this, where you come through and lay out some more natural looking path, now you've got a whole bunch of squares where it's partial. So with this, it's really going to depend on what you're looking for in your combat, whether you're going super tactical or what. Okay, so that's more or less right there. It needs some big ass bones. Okay. So this is our background layer here, which is nice because it means that anything we add on top of it, or anything else that we add, is going to be on top of that. And I mean, we come back in, make this a little thinner. There we go. And not text, stamps. Bone. That's not the right kind of bone. Nope. All right. So another challenge you run into, what happens when the stamp that you want to use does not exist at the scale you need to use it? So this is fine. We can still very much work around this. It's just going to be a little bit of tinkering. So 500 is the maximum size you can make stuff in this. So we can look at that. Look here, we can see that the what goes through the what? This first gap here is where the road is. So I'll come back here. So any sort of mapping, there's a whole lot of adapt and overcome. And that's fine. I'm going to stick with this, that, yeah. Make a back reference. Okay. So when you're doing all this stuff, the other thing to remember is that scale is relative. So you don't have to be afraid of creating something that isn't exactly to the scale that you show here. Like, it's important to keep it relatively close. But you don't have to sweat it and like panic about anything. Okay, so we don't need to worry about the hillside, which is good. Yeah, so there's just be a whole bunch of trees around. And so this is where we can get a little bit finicky with the actual placement of trees and things like that. So we'll come down here, open the catalog, go back to watercolor battle mat. No, get rid of that search. No. Oh, that's pretty cool. Forest, here we go. Conifers, dead trees. Here we go. Trees, foliage. Perfect. Size that down from 500. Okay, so one right there and one right there. So, so why are we placing trees? A little particularly, so a little grid of 4 going around that path. Okay. Go back in stamps. Bushes. Here we go. Dig that. How are we doing? Oh yeah. Definitely. Yeah, this is. Look at this. Right to the bottom. There we go. So in place of some of this stuff is going to be falling under the cover and concealment concept. So sometimes when you're creating a battle map or when you see battle maps being made, things tend to be very wide open, even in forests. And I like to add cover and concealment when I do use battle maps because I find that it encourages the players to play smarter. Like they'll take cover, they'll move from point to point, they'll try to hide and do things, and it's really cool. And as a game master, what I really enjoy is that it lets me play my monsters smart, play my opponents smart. So they'll be moving around and doing the same thing. And so you can add little bits of I wonder what that looks like at 500. Oh, that doesn't look too bad. Nice. All right, so I've got those. Got some campfires. That's handy. But our near now is rock. Alright, so we're up for wizard stuff. No, don't need that. Definitely be revisiting that for the lake. How many tentacles are there? Oh, nice. Definitely revisiting that when I do some stuff around the lake later on. Here we go. So yeah, it's under boulder. Good call. Bit too big. Got some rocks out now. Nice, nice. Okay, what else we got? Now, one of the things to think about as this stuff is going forwards is whether or not you're going to export the map with the broken stone tables. Cool. Whether or not you're going to export stuff with the grid on it, or if you're going to export it without. Just plant. I want some colorful bushes. Add some fantasy to the location. There we go. Oh, I like that. Maybe make them a little bit smaller. These are a little bit big. 85? Yeah, that looks nicer. So when you export it, you do have the option of leaving the grid turned on, and I recommend that if you're going to be using the map directly at a table. So like if you're in a live game or something like that, and you're planning on printing it out, definitely leave the grid on. If not, like if you're using a VTT, especially ones that offer the ability to, like, I think they all have the ability now to upgrade your own, or not upgrade, upload your own photos or images to use as backgrounds, and then throw a grid on top of it. Do that, and then sort of play around with the scaling until it works. So some stuff you can see right here, like for example, I've somehow raised this tree above the grid, which is actually, oh, you know what? Perfect chance to talk about another thing you can do. If you want to make it seem like certain objects aren't available as, yeah, I'm gonna throw some stuffs down. If you want to make it look as though some terrain is unavailable on your map for the players to utilize, then doing a raising something above the grid is a great way to do that, because it creates canalizing terrain. There we go. So you can see here, these stumps are above the grid right now. But if I move it down a layer, now it's under it. So I could move all these trees above the grid, and suddenly now they're communicating something different to our different to the people who are playing. Because now when they see that, like, okay, well, the grid goes around it, and so it creates a natural, well, not natural, but it creates a flow for them to go through. So I can take this. Let's see. Let's move this up a layer. More. Yeah, there we go. Move everything up a little layer here. This is tool. Oh yeah. Where is that? So select something and opacity. So you can play around with the opacity of objects if you want to create gridded out difficult terrain. It is super cool and super handy. Move that up a layer. There we go. Hit the save button. And which one was this? This was... call this the skeleton trail. Alright, so now if we're working with this as our baseline for the battle map itself, it's pretty good. So everything I've left underneath the grid is terrain that I want people to be able to move through. Everything I've left, everything I've popped up above the grid is terrain that I don't want the players and stuff to be able to move through, or the monster to be able to move through. And Storm D beat me to it here. We can also go around, you can reduce the opacity of things to show the grid underneath. So what I'll do is just Command Z. So, and save as a clone. Now, one thing I don't do with battle maps is I avoid labeling on them at all costs, because you want the space to be open and free. So unless you're like leaving a section open, I try to avoid it. So now we're into the copy version. So I'm going to reduce the opacity down to 60%. You can do that either here or up there as well. And yeah, I really enjoy making, like, these maps are fun to make. They're small, and you really get to do a lot with them. Not just in the sense of like making them for combat and stuff like that, but you could also very easily use a map like this to engineer social encounters or discoveries, like natural wonders or items, all sorts of stuff. So I've got all those lowered, and these bushes do the same thing. Now, it's absolutely thrilling to watch this, but this is the process. Helps if I hit the right button and don't start rotating things. Now, where would I use a map like this, where the terrain has been made partially transparent? This would be, I honestly, I would use this for players who are a bit more experienced and are really have really come to grips with the base level combat and movement systems and everything else like that, as sort of like a way to level up their experience. Whereas the original map I would probably use with newer players who are still getting down to like the nuts and bolts of their characters, the game system, all that sort of stuff. And all of that falls within the spec of the Grafis Hill area, which is supposed to be for like low-level adventure, beginning adventurers. Now, if you really wanted to get into the weeds with this, you could also scale the levels of opacity through everything, and really make it into into an operation where like the players could see exactly, this area is, this is rough terrain, this is difficult terrain. There we go. Hit that save button. There we go. All right, so this is our first little battle map. It's pretty simple. There's not a lot of huge complexity going on it. But we have a very functional map. And what we can do on this one is, because on this one we've got the transparency going on, is we can increase the grid square a little bit. 1.5? Yeah, 1.5. That looks decent. Increase grid squares. Pardon me. There we go. So just take it with the grid square there, so that if you are going to export it with the grids, jeez, it pops a little bit nicer now. Even where stuff is over top of it, we can still clearly see. And we could also, if we wanted to, bring it up so it's over top of absolutely everything. Which is what I think I'll do for this one, because I like how that looks now. And yeah, here we go. It's our basic battle map. So we've got two of them. We have one that is designed for sort of like newer players who are just getting into it and getting their feet underneath them. And then one's for this one here, where you have helps if I get all the parts. And this one where you have transparent terrain to let your players know that they are able to traverse more stuff. And it works. It's a very simple battle map. Not a huge level of complexity going on. Um, some other stuff you could also do if you want to is, let's see here. Don't generally advise this. Doing this after you've cloned the map. But because you are zoomed in, yeah, first world problems. Oh, yeah. Echo Knight. Yeah, oh man, I love Echo Knights. They're cool. Very sweet concept. This could also do stuff like this. 'Cause there's no reason that you can't show the trains. Train varies a little bit. So you could drop some hills, or drop some of these little prefabricated hills around. Obviously got to play around a bit because the bushes and stuff are there. But you could do that and create a sort of layered effect to show the finer detail that you want to work at. Right now we've got what? 1, 2, 3. Maybe I can just look at the grid. What am I saying? So yeah, we've got this is a 25 by 19 map. So let's try. So decent. So where I was talking about earlier, and as got brought up, when you're looking around and trying to figure out the spaces that are needed for things. This gives, so your long range people have something to do. You've got lots of places to jump around and maneuver to. Area effect still has purpose. Yeah, it works. It's nice. So what we can do now is, so that's that area. So basically, what you'll find. Oh, yeah, leaf page. It's fine. We're not saving that. Yeah, I need to play around with that light filter more. What you'll find is the amount of time it takes to make a small battle map is pretty low, especially for a wilderness area like this. These ones come together, at least I find, relatively quickly. Whereas now we're going to come up here to the second region, and things get a little bit more complex. So I did like being able to do this. Take a look at an area. So that one's good. Oh. Map, watercolor battle maps. So again, we have a situation where we're looking at a map where, yes, if you throw a grid over it, it can be an encounter map, but ugh. So let's get this filled in. So background, open So the last couple of weeks there, I have really been digging deep into cyberpunk lore because A, it's fun, and B, it is going some places that are a little bit unexpected for a role playing game. But wow, um, so cool. So what I'm talking about is basically, um, so I'm gonna come down. How do I want to work this? So I sort of want this to be the area. So that's going to be the outer edge. So basically what's been happening with Cyberpunk is for years and years now, it has been killing it in terms of world building. Like even back in the 90s, looking at it, and even with the problematic aspects, because they're like definitely. What is. Okay, so I think that's supposed to be the top. Okay. Even with the problematic aspects it had in the 80s and 90s when it was coming out, because it did. Like, there was some, like, just bad libertarian additions uh, to the lore that just didn't add anything to it. Let's just put it that way. Even with all that, they really like went in all in on the world building and trying to create a world that felt right. Um, even though the even though the world was often awful and stuff like that, it and it also like begged you at times to ignore it, which is a criticism I 100% agree with from about Cyberpunk 2027. And I'm just going to put a bunch of these out and then arrange them the way I want them to go. Um, the end result was a pretty functional world. Like, weird at times. Like, there's stuff that I still don't agree with. For example, I'm not a fan of the nomad role because the inspirations that they were working with when they created the original game, like Cyberpunk 2013, were things like Philip C. Dick and so on. But they also included the Road Warrior, and like I love some Mad Max, love some Road Warrior, but it's also not cyberpunk, and it doesn't, to my mind, it doesn't fit particularly well with the larger part of the genre. And as a cultural phenomena, they're also limited in like how long they can persist for. Like a lot of the writing was kind of a mess for it. Um, but the stuff that they've been doing lately has just been outstanding. Um, and part of it is influence from CD Project Red, who themselves have been doing just a great job uh, making it better, like more enjoyable, more interesting. Oh, there we go. Let's rotate that around. And it's stuff like in 2077 they have callbacks to. There was some really amazing. Oh, I've got some fun conversation going on here. Echo Knights. I love the idea of them. So cool. Anyways, there's some fun callbacks they did in 2077 to some third-party content for Cyberpunk that involved like vampires and stuff like that, and I really dig that. I love the fact that they reconciled at least part of the whole cyber generation thing with by turning it into an urban legend. I thought that was great. But the thing that I'm really digging about it is that once you push past Night City, it gets really, really fascinating. So you're kind of here. I didn't much care for. Yeah, Cyber Generations. I liked the idea of it. I liked the concept of the arcologies and how they could, pardon me, how they would change cultures and like the sort of like the subcultures that the kids represented within the arcologies. I thought that stuff was cool. Because you don't usually get a lot of cultural exploration like that at any level in games, but they decided to do that, which I liked. So here's our little hill. Okay, so we've got sort of a rectangular house. But it was just sort of like the superpowers aspect of it, and the nano stuff, and it sort of fed. And there's a lot of wild influences happening in the late '80s and in the early '90s that I remember. Like people were the idea of like nanobots and nanomachines, genetic engineering, with the whole goats that could give spider silk with their milk, spider silk proteins. So you had some. Yeah, that was exactly it. It was okay in a vacuum, but it did not reconcile with Cyberpunk 2020 like at all. Like, because it basically, I remember in the book itself, it described the whole Edge Runner phenomena as like this like flash in the pan, like youth event that everybody gave up on, and they all went out and got corporate jobs and switched to the 9 to 5, and none of it made sense. Like the arcologies made sense. Then after that, it just fell apart fast. Let's see here, ruin, nothing. Let's see here, let's try destroyed. All right, so we'll do it the old-fashioned way. Yeah, like all of it just mosaics, but pits, no. Yeah, it didn't reconcile well. But yeah, they've been dealing with some of their stuff by like integrating it into the fabric of the game like that. Oh, absolutely, yeah. Mutant powers being a thing. Yeah, big left hook to the hard sci-fi. Yes. Yeah, 100% agree with you there. It was a giant tonal shift, and that was the same issue that Cyberpunk 2030X or version 3 ran into. Walls and stairs, rough walls. In that, like the art was a turnoff, and I understand where the art came from. Mike Pondsmith was really into collecting action figures at the time, and they were pretty cool. And like the whole like creating dioramas of them to create the art for the interior of the book wasn't a bad plan in a vacuum, but as a plan to move forwards with for your company's like flagship game that had previously had a completely different art style, not the best choice. Broken. Oh, maybe if I search broken. There we go. Gold walls, no. Marble railings. Sure. That works. Um, yeah, just. And then the tonal shift was too much. It was way too much for the game to bear because Cyberpunk 2030X there, version 3, it switched from Cyberpunk to. It's like nanopunk would be the best description. Like they sort of took like the gray goo nightmare. I'm just going to place a bunch of these and start playing with them after I get them out. I took the Grey Goose scenario and ran with it, and basically had it so like this Night City was this self-perpetuating nanite mass. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, Snow Crash to the Diamond Age. And yeah, it's like a lot of the pressures that were in Cyberpunk, like the reasons why people were doing stuff, the insecurity and all that sort of thing wasn't there, and the whole thing just felt off. It was really hard to get into, at least for us. So we just stuck with 2020, which is I think what a lot of people ended up doing. Okay. Let's build a ruin. Let's play with the size here. Nope. Okay, so let's say 115 is going to be our magic size here. Yeah, it was late 90s, early thousands were a wild time. A lot of weird stuff happening. A lot of weird game stuff happening. But we did. Cyberpunk did survive, though. Thankfully, made it into the 21st century eventually. But man, like the stuff that's going on. So one of the big things that I'm really looking forward to in terms of development of in-game lore is finding out what happened between Cyberpunk Red and Cyberpunk 2077. Because Cyberpunk Red, as it exists right now, it oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, gaming is going to reflect other things going on. That is absolutely true. Um, but yeah, so in Cyberpunk 2020 and Cyberpunk 20 or Cyberpunk Red, cyberware isn't hackable. Like if you have cyberware, you do not have to worry about somebody doing what you do in 2027 and like just hacking your cyberware, giving you cyberpsychosis via it's basically a malware attack. That's not an issue. They have to worry about. But it suddenly is later on. And from my observations, they're working really hard to square things between the tabletop game and Edge Runners and 2077. Well, speaking of Edge Runners, if you haven't voted for the Anime of the Year things yet with Crunchyroll, you should go there and vote for Cyberpunk 2077. Because damn, that series deserves all the love and attention that it's getting. so I'm going to move that back so it's lining up with the squares a bit better. So building challenge is getting the building to stay more or less in the squares. You want to have as few mucked up squares as possible. Not just because it is nice to it looks better, or in my opinion, it looks better, but also makes combat less of a hassle when you're doing it. Anyway, so yeah, so they're all of a sudden cyberware is hackable, and cyberpsychosis isn't just a. I'm just gonna lock some stuff in place here. All of a sudden, cyberpsychosis isn't just a psychological malady. Now it's an attack that can happen. So some pretty serious stuff went down between when 2077 kicks off and when the game picks up in Cyberpunk Red. Like, there's been a bunch of changes, and I'm looking forward to seeing how they reconcile it. And I'm especially looking forward to seeing what mechanics they develop to let players attack cyberware and go into that, because that is going to change, like, fundamentally change the vibe of the game. Oh wow, once it's locked in, you gotta come over here to unlock it. Nice. It's going to fundamentally change the vibe of the entire game. And how the utility of the Netrunner is going to skyrocket. I'm also looking forward to seeing how they are going to reconcile the looser definition of an edge runner that you're seeing in 2077 versus the more well-defined. Let's see, I need some rubble. So we got broken stuff. Yeah, broken stairs. The rolls, because see here. Oh, absolutely. Like, from a gameplay perspective, the Cyberpunk Red Netrunner is head and shoulders above the original one. Their choice to rubble. Okay, I'll have to look through it again. Their choice specifically to let them take actions in both net space and meat space at the same time, and making them more mobile just wildly changes them. Like, and the way they actually built net running, or the changes they've done to the net running mechanics, make it friendlier for players to get into. Like, in Cyberpunk 2020, there's no way that I would play a Netrunner. They just felt too limited. Maybe I'll throw some natural stairs down. They felt too limited. No, that doesn't look right. They felt too limited. They felt like they're, and the fact that all their activities were basically a mini game within the game. So like when your Netrunner went to work, the back then referee, now game master, basically had to divide their attention between stuff only the Netrunner was able to interact with and keeping the rest of the group in it. So they've done a way better job, but between 2077 and what the stuff we see in that and what we see in Red, I'm really looking forward to the supplements and developments, because a big thing I noticed, at least, with 2077 was that roles have become much, much more fluid. Maybe I'll check fantasy battle maps. Maybe they've got rubble. Like, there's no, like, yes, there's still solos. Yes, there's still Lawman. Yes, there's still a bunch of stuff like dedicated net runners, but everybody has a little bit of net running capability, and there's more overlap between the different roles. Oh, here we go. Stonewall Rebel. Perfect. Oh, yeah, that mixed start style is not doing it for me with that stamp set um, at all. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to seeing that. I'm also looking forward to seeing what happens post 2077. Because when you get into the world building for. Maybe I should just use this set right off right for everything. Yeah, yeah. There are definitely some choices that were made. The funny thing with a lot of that stuff, with 2077, is that the anime, like, it revitalized the game. Like, that was pretty straightforward, but it also made people realize there was more options available within the game. Then people started to look at the role playing game, started seeing there was more options of that, and realized that was available in 2077 as well. And so all of a sudden, you start seeing all these wild build videos exploding online for stuff. Uh, yeah, the reason I'm interested in post 2077 is because A, that's when Phantom Liberty is happening. So I want to find out what the canonical ending to 2077 was. And I also want to find out maybe watercolor cities. Is there ruins in here? I also want to find out what happens with the new USA and the potential breakaway spots, because it gets mentioned in 2077 that in the 2060s there's actually a huge war on the North American continent again, and it's what do they call it, the reunification war or something like that, and the USA takes on a new name. They rename themselves the New USA, and they basically rampage west and start like grabbing all the little autonomous zones, all get brought back in by force. And one of the big ones was the Pacific Confederation, which consisted of Oregon, part of Idaho, Washington State, and part of British Columbia. So it was actually like an international zone, because it's theoretically two nations. Canada somehow exists in Cyberpunk. Like, I say that as a Canadian. Canada and Cyberpunk has always been a weird situation, and that's like a whole Lord Ivor episode into itself that'll probably be coming out later this year. But it was noted, like in Cyberpunk Red, you read about the Pacific Confederation, and they have power. Like they're a note. Yeah, Canada, every RPG is always a weird situation. That's just facts. Um, they're a notable power in Cyberpunk Red. Like, they're literally a functional nation. Like, not just an autonomous state that's still semi-connected to the U.S., but like the only thing really connecting them to the U.S. government in Red is the fact that there's still military bases there. So like whatever Cyberpunk's equivalent of Joint Base Lewis McChord and whatever the naval station there is and stuff like that, that's there, and that's pretty much it. For everything else, it's running, the whole region is running as its own operation. And then when the reunification war happens, they actually don't, there's no fighting there. There's like some backdoor deals, some diplomacy, and all that sort of stuff. And suddenly they're like, "Oh yeah, we're back. We're totally part of you and have been the whole time." And like it's obvious like lies and fabrications, but it's the line that gets everybody. Let's scatter some of this around. It's the lie that gets everybody to feel good at night and prevents the conflict from reaching that area. Meanwhile, Night City goes a different route, and perpetual bad guys, Arasaka, are actually the heroes for Night City. Because when everything was going sideways and Night City didn't know what to do, there's a new USA division on their doorstep, and the mayor of Night City is like, nope, we need to stay our weird little unholy um, capitalist nightmare. Who will save us? And it was Arasaka. Arasaka comes in the clutch and saves the day, deploying a carrier battle group outside of the city. And so the new USA division stops. They don't advance anymore, and Arasaka gets to come back to North America after being basically banned for a long time. Let's see here. House does not match at all. Love it. Um, so they go from being basically banned to being the heroes, which is, part of why in 2077 they talk about how like, Arasaka owns the town and stuff like that. It's because they're literally the only reason that the town, that like Night City still exists, and they know it. There's a corner piece. There we go. It's like all that stuff's going down, and what I want to know is post 2077 is whether or not you get split off areas, because the Pacific Confederation, like like the way they write about it in Cyberpunk Red, made me want to play in that area more than in Night City. That is outstanding. That your boss named something Project Arasaka. You should pick up hit up Redbubble and get some of the Arasaka stickers and stuff like that and start slapping on everything to do with the project. And then at casual, when he starts asking you like where you guys found all this stuff. um. Anyways, oh, sorry, I digress. I love trolling bosses. Um. Okay, so it's gonna be Grafis Hill, East Ruins. Yes, yes. Get the unlabeled. See if anyone picks up on it. Ah, it's great. So yeah, so like all that stuff. But when you read Cyberpunk Red, yeah, like one of the criticisms I saw of Cyberpunk 2077 was that it's an open world game that begs you to ignore the nice. Yes, keep joshing over that. Yeah, stay on that. Um, it's an open world game that begs you to ignore its open world, and I agree with that. And the tabletop role playing game has the exact same problem because the amount of effort that they've gone into creating the like larger cyberpunk world is incredible. Like it's just the detail, pardon me, the thought, the everything they put into it is amazing. but they want you to stay focused on Night City because that's where sort of like their maximum effort went into. But you have like the Pacific Confederation is described in Starbuck Red as basically being, like Night City plus. Like like all the things that are happening in Night City are happening there too. But it's a place where the Neocorps are like tiptoeing around because they actually have like legislation and rules. So because they don't want how do I spell ruin, right? Nope. Broken? Temple texture tiles. I like how these ones feel. Yeah. Right. So one of the things I did on this map, probably important that I should mention it, is that I did everything in the background, and that means that if I want to paint in the foreground, for whatever reason, I need to physically raise the land. Because basically what I'm doing on this is in order to... One of the challenges I've encountered making maps in Incarnate is that if you stack a whole bunch of stuff up and export it, it's a giant file. So in order to save some space and make this easier for export, what I've done is I've shrunk down the number of layers I've added onto it. So for example, I did not add, so that's adding land. So I didn't add any, I just painted the background instead. So the downside is that there's no foreground to paint. So everything that I'm painting, everything I'm adding on here goes into the thing, or goes into the background. So let's see your comment. Well, that's just the thing, is that a lot of the world building gets better when you shift folks out of Night City. Except for the logistics and the nomads. So, for example, Africa is experiencing like a technological and cultural renaissance in the post Fourth Corporate War era. They've just like, it was a location where they built like some space launch pads and everything else like that. So there's a lot of connections between Africa and the orbital community from before the war, post-war, with the collapse of so many megacorps and so many groups being weak. A lot of governments and organizations in Africa moved fast, seized power, seized operations, and like, yeah, it's cool tech, but there's not a ton of info on it. That's a problem, absolutely. And the Pacific Confederation actually had a decent little blurb in the book. And yeah, just you need there to be more. And where the world building, to me, where the world building stops making sense and things get really dodgy, is where you can often see a creator's favorite group in a game, or a group that has legacy value that is being brought forwards into a new edition, and it's just sort of like being like shoehorned in. And for me, that is really, let's see how many trees we got around here. So we've got a bunch of bushes around it. Okay, and for me, that's really exemplified by the nomads, because in 2077, or sorry, not in 2077, in the 2020 books, they didn't really make sense. Oh man, I've got a whole I'll get on to Arasaka in a moment. I've got some definitely got some thoughts on that lore wise. But Bush, there it is. Oh wait, no, you watercolor battlement. The the nomads were supposed to be displaced Americans. Basically, they've been priced out of everything, and so they've formed these semi-nomadic caravans that are traveling all around the place, which is fine. It's not how I think I would deal with. I would deal with that particular question of what happened to the American population because there's so many Americans. Like even taking into account the population of the United States when the original book was created. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's very much an artifact of 80s economic anxiety and also the discordant influence of the Road Warrior and Mad Max stuff on the world. Because you can make Cyberpunk and Mad Max mix. And this is going to sound bizarre to say, but Palladium did it somehow. It's probably the weirdest thing I'm going to say on this stream is that Palladium successfully mixed post-apocalyptic Mad Max style background setting with high-tech cyberpunk, and it was in the otherwise objectively terrible Rifts Australia books. It was a book, or I can't remember if there's one or two of them. I think it might have just been one. Because they had, what was it? Sydney and Melbourne were two, like, ultra-tech cities. Like, just, like, straight up, like, pre-Rifts, still, like, levels of technology surrounded by, like, a Mad Max-style wasteland. Yeah, there was. Yeah, yeah. Man, reading those even as a kid, like as a teenager, reading the Australia books, and then like the Spirit West book, just like literally hurt my brain. Like didn't even have the words to describe like what I was reading. Didn't have the academic vocabulary for it, but it was just. Ugh. But they mixed it, and somehow they made it work. Like it was awful. There's definitely a lot of racism going on in it, like with so many other stuff from Palladium from that era. But it worked. But in Cyberpunk, it didn't because they didn't create those sort of like ultra tech mechas for there to be like all the high tech population, and then you have all your apocalypse around it. And so it kind of made sense in 2020 because they were still like there's the whole economic anxiety thing was still happening then, but coming into Cyberpunk Red, and they're like, oh, there's still nomads, and now they're in charge of global shipping. I'm like, how? Like, how did like a nomad family from 2020 that was like living in a trailer or like living on a boat engaging in light piracy is now suddenly like in charge of all the major shipping from point A to point B and as like part of the world's like giant logistical hubs. It just I read it and I just was it just didn't blend well for me. And then on top of that, you also have the simple reality that I'll throw a tree down there, a little tree up here. Then you have the simple reality that like within the book itself, they're the only role. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think Australia too is one of like those perpetually in production, coming soon operations from Palladium, which means it's basically never going to come. let's get a bit of soil, dark soil going on here. So yeah, so they didn't. They don't blend well, and they not only do they not blend well, but they don't like within the lore of the game. They start getting harder and harder to work with until finally, like with Cyberpunk 2077, you're seeing nomads are basically disappearing from the world. Like there's a small handful. Like there's a small handful of nomads left who are sort of like keeping the flame alive, but from the looks of things, a lot of other ones have become basically criminal gangs who engage in like in banditry to make ends meet. And the the rest, it just didn't work. The rest became like a workforce. Like it's one of the things that's noted in the lore for 2077 was that a lot of the end in red is that a lot of the reconstruction happens because nomads come and settle, basically cease being nomads and become a labor force for everybody. And that makes sense to me because they never really seemed to be much. I'm going to turn off this grid. There we go. They never really seemed to make sense, and so having them come and put down roots again, it tracks. Like at least that's a smart world building thing. But on the other hand, they've got them still. Like one of the big plot lines is with Panem, and she wants to keep it going. Yeah. What would be the corporation you start to see if the entire cyberpunk world were just off the ground today? If they're being designed, if Cyberpunk was being designed up from the ground today, I think that the big things we would see would be, actually a lot of the ones to cover: big oil, pharmaceuticals, and startup tech. So but I don't know. I think one of the big changes that would have to happen would be actually a lack of private equity firms. Because, to me at least, the genre really thrives on not having consolidated backers. There's no like rock solid, like this group is behind, owns all these companies, whereas in the real world right now we have sort of like this like jagged pyramid moving up towards where you've got like companies owned by companies owned by companies owned by like a handful of like private equity groups or venture capitalists and so on. With Cyberpunk, it's a much more old school vibe for the corporations. So like you have like a family of owners or like a consortium of owners who like focus in on that. And I think that if they added in venture capitalists and private equity firms, it would get really, I think it would get messier than it already is. Like it could absolutely work, but man, like I would not want to be the person doing the math to get it all there. Okay. So I'm going to come back to this map. Let's see here. Let's fit it to the screen. Wow, yeah, we have hit 90 minutes here. So I'm going to come back and finish this map next week and carry on with the other Grafis Hill areas. So I'm going to back out of this. Yeah, leave page. It's fine. Alright, so this is saved. Nice. Alright, so last week we did Grafis Hill, and we finished it off this week. And then this week we got started on the Grafis Hill East Ruins. So we've got a little area going on here. I'm going to come back in and finish this off. So one of the things I am going to do off screen between now and next Tuesday when I'm back on is I'm going to recce out more of the stamps that are available, because I'm really seeing like the divergence for the battle maps between the watercolor selection versus the fantasy selection. It's pretty rough. And like, well, I did enjoy doing the watercolor, using the watercolor stuff for the larger map. I'm badly tempted right now to switch to this because there's so many more options to work with using that. So we'll see how it goes. But we have this basic map here. So this is it's a smaller encounter area. A little bit cozy. We've got our skeleton and lots of cover concealment lying around. So lots of stuff for the players to do. And then over here, this is going to be a little bit of a larger map. You know, because we've got a building here, and we're going to scatter some stuff around out here. Make it look really nice. Have some fun with it. And then, yeah, what I'm thinking is we'll finish up the encounter areas and then move on to mapping a new region around Balam Village. And if you're supporting me on Patreon or Coffee, once these little battle maps are done, I'm going to be bundling them up with the Encounter Zone map, and I'll be putting them out for all my supporters. And there will be, I'm just finishing getting the rough mechanics and some other stuff hashed out for a game to match these. And so I'm going to push that out to my my supporters as well, and then everybody else will see it over on Itch at some point in the near future, I hope. So it has been awesome talking today. Love the conversation we had going on. Love the fact that you're going to be continuing to josh your boss about their choice of Project Arasaka. Oh, I love it. That is great. So I'll be back on Tuesday. Wherever you're watching, please remember to like and subscribe. Tell your friends, share it online, help grow the channel out and all that sort of good stuff. Because yeah, this is what I'm doing full time now. So yeah, any assistance always appreciated. Have a great day. Take care. You'll find me on social media as POC Gamer, and yeah, have a good one.